You know that feeling when everything seems completely normal, and then, just like that, it isn't? It was a typical Thursday morning, one of those mornings where you feel like you're part of a well-rehearsed play. I was moving on autopilot, packing lunches, brushing tangled hair, yelling up the stairs for Liam to find his missing sock, which, as usual, was right in front of him, and mentally calculating how much time I had left before I'd be late for work again. Dylan was in the kitchen, pouring orange juice into mismatched plastic cups for the kids, humming some classic rock tune under his breath like he didn't have a care in the world. That's his gift, you know, floating through the chaos with that irritating calm that made me both love and low-key envy him. And that's when I noticed it. His left hand. Bare. No wedding ring. Now, I'm not the obsessive type, at least I don't think I am, but I notice things. Especially things that have been constant for over a decade. I bought that ring with him on a sunny Sunday afternoon after months of arguing over rose gold versus classic white. He settled for platinum in the end. Said it felt clean. I laughed at the time. What kind of man describes a metal as clean? Anyway, I didn't say anything right away. I told myself maybe he'd just taken it off to shave or something and forgot to put it back on. But by the time the kids were grabbing their backpacks and heading out the door, it was still missing from his finger. That's when I asked, casually while pretending to dig through my bag for my car keys. "Hey, where's your ring?" He glanced down like he was seeing his own hand for the first time. "Oh, huh. Must have slipped off when I was working in the yard yesterday. You know, with all the raking and stuff." I didn't even notice. I nodded slowly. "You didn't notice?" He chuckled, light, breezy. Not a worry in the world. "I'll check the grass later. Probably just sitting near the fence somewhere." Something about the way he said it felt off. Like, too smooth. Like he'd rehearsed that answer in his head already. But I let it go. For now. I kissed the kids goodbye, straightened Aubrey's crooked ponytail one last time, and watched them shuffle off to the bus stop. Then I turned back to Dylan, who was standing there with his coffee mug, smiling like nothing had happened. And maybe, to him, nothing had. "You okay?" he asked, lifting a brow. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired. Work's been crazy." He walked over and kissed my forehead. "We'll make it through, babe. You're the strongest woman I know." I almost laughed at that. Strongest woman? Maybe. But I wasn't stupid. And something in my gut told me this wasn't just about a lost ring. I left the house that morning trying to shake off the strange feeling in my chest. But it stuck with me all day, like a splinter you can't see but definitely feel every time you move. My office felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the air conditioning. Or maybe it was just me, pulling into myself, trying to process why a simple missing ring could make my whole body feel like it was bracing for impact. I sat in my cubicle pretending to answer emails, but my mind kept drifting back to that kitchen, to his bare hand wrapped around a mug, to his too relaxed smile. I couldn't shake it. Here's the thing about Dylan, he's charming. Always has been. He could make a stranger laugh in a minute flat. He used to bring me coffee at work just because. Write silly notes in my lunch. Dance with me in the living room for no reason. That Dylan, he felt like a dream. But lately, I don't know. The touches had been fewer. The jokes felt a little flatter. And that morning, standing there without his wedding ring, it felt like a neon sign I'd ignored was suddenly lit up in flashing red. At lunch, I texted him. Just a casual check-in. Me, any luck finding the ring? Dylan, not yet. I'll look again after work. Me, maybe we should get you a new one if it doesn't show up? Dylan, haha. Trying to get me a backup husband too? I forced a laugh in the break room. Typical Dylan, deflect with humor. But humor wasn't going to make the unease disappear. After work, I picked up the kids from daycare. We played Uno after dinner, like we always did on Thursdays. Dylan joined in halfway through the game, tossed Liam over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, and everyone left. Except me. Because I noticed again, his ring finger was still bare. That night, after the kids went to bed, we watched a movie. He fell asleep 10 minutes in, remote dangling from his hand, mouth slightly open, snoring. I sat there staring at him in the dim light, wondering what story his hand could tell if it could talk. When I went to bed, I checked the bathroom sink, no ring. I looked on the nightstand. Nothing. Even peeked into the laundry basket. Still nothing. I know. Maybe I was overthinking it. But if you've ever been in love and suddenly felt like you're the only one still showing up for it, you understand. You feel things before you know them. And something told me deep down that this wasn't just about a lost ring. It was about something or someone he didn't want me to know about. You ever have one of those moments where reality tilts just a little? Not a full-on crash, not yet. Just a shift, a sharp lurch that lets you know something's not right. That was me, a few days after Dylan lost his wedding ring. It started out so small. A Tuesday afternoon, unremarkable in every way. I left work early because Aubrey had a mild fever and Liam's after-school program got canceled. Life was in one of those messy, unavoidable states where everything overlaps: your career, your kids, your thoughts, your doubts. I pulled up to the house, barely coherent from the day, and parked behind Dylan's car. That's when it happened. I opened the back door of his SUV to grab my cardigan. It had been unusually chilly that morning. And I swear I wasn't looking for anything. I didn't even have the energy to be suspicious. But life has a funny way of throwing truth in your lap when you least expect it. The wrapper was wedged between the seat and the seatbelt buckle. You know the kind, cheap, shiny, and unmistakable. A used condom wrapper, crumpled just enough to scream used without being subtle. Time froze. It's hard to explain how your mind tries to make sense of something so outrageous so quickly. At first, I thought maybe it had been there for a while. Maybe someone else had used the car, his brother? A friend? But no one else drove Dylan's car. Ever. And deep down, I already knew. It was like seeing a red light and trying to convince yourself it's still yellow. You can lie to yourself for a second or two, but it won't change what's real. I stared at the wrapper for what felt like minutes, my mouth dry, my breath shallow. Then I did the one thing I told myself I'd never do. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of it. Evidence. Cold, sickening proof that my husband might be cheating on me. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The thought alone made me want to scrub my hands with boiling water. I closed the door like it never happened, but my heart was thundering. My fingers trembled as I carried my cardigan inside. The kids needed me, and I did what every mother does when her world is spinning. I faked it. I kissed Aubrey's forehead, gave her some Tylenol, and let her snuggle up on the couch. Liam wanted grilled cheese, so I made it with the crust cut off, just the way he liked it. I laughed when he told me about his classmate who called the teacher Mom by accident. All the while, I had that photo in my phone. That tiny, undeniable grenade. Waiting to blow. After they went to bed, I sat at the dining table, lights low, glass of wine in hand. Dylan was in the shower. And I just stared at the photo. Why would he even leave it in there? Was it arrogance? Carelessness? Or was he just so confident I'd never look, never suspect? I wanted to scream, but screaming felt useless. Instead, I started piecing things together like a detective in my own home. The missing wedding ring, the locked phone, the mysterious business call he had to take outside last Saturday, right when we were about to watch a movie together. The new cologne he started wearing, one I hadn't bought, one he said he got from a client as a gift. The puzzle pieces didn't just fit. They clicked with a horrible, echoing finality. But I still had no proof beyond that wrapper. And a woman like me, who has worked hard to build a life, a home, a family, I wasn't about to throw accusations based on gut feelings and garbage. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I Googled private investigators near me. It felt insane. Like something from a TV drama. Not real life. Not my life. But I needed to know. If I was going to burn down my marriage, I wanted to do it with certainty, not speculation. I scrolled past the sketchy-looking ones and found a site for Mitchell investigations. Clean. Professional. Discreet. I liked that word. Discreet. I called. A woman picked up. Calm voice. No small talk. Mitchell Investigations. How can I help you? And just like that, the words spilled out. Not all of them. Not the tears I was holding back. But enough. I gave my name, my situation, my suspicions. I told her about the missing ring, about the rapper in the car. She listened, quietly. And then she said, "Would you like to come in and talk?" I did. The next day, I told Dylan I was working late and went to her office instead. It was in a nondescript building, no signage, exactly the kind of place someone like me could disappear into without drawing attention. Her name was Karen. Mid-40s. Sharp eyes, firm handshake, not easily shocked. I told her everything. She took notes, asked questions, nodded thoughtfully. When I mentioned Dylan's frequent work-from-home schedule, she asked for photos. When I described his car and typical hangouts, she asked for plate numbers, usual routes, gym memberships, anything that could help build a profile. Then she leaned forward and said something I'll never forget. "Marissa, if he's hiding something, we'll find it. But just know once we start, there's no going back." And I nodded. Because that's the thing with truth. Once it starts to trickle in, it never stops. When I left her office that night, the sky was a strange color. Purple and gray, like a bruise spreading across the horizon. I drove home in silence. No music. Just me and the hum of tires on pavement. Dylan was on the couch, feet up, phone in hand. He smiled when I walked in. "Hey, babe. Long day?" I nodded. "Yeah. Super busy." And I kissed him on the cheek like nothing had changed. Because it hadn't. Not yet. But it would. Oh, it would. You know how they say once you start looking for something, you see it everywhere? That's exactly what happened to me after I left Karen's office. I thought I'd already been suspicious. Thought the wedding ring and the rapper in the car had cracked open some kind of truth, but those were just the tremors. What came next felt like a full-blown earthquake, one where everything around me started to feel shaky and unstable, no matter how normal it looked on the surface. Suddenly, everything Dylan did felt like a clue. Every smile, every pause before answering, every time he left the room with his phone, it all felt suspicious. I wasn't trying to be paranoid, believe me. I needed to be wrong. But my instincts were on high alert, and when you've got even a whisper of betrayal in your gut, your mind starts to catalog every detail. Let me tell you something about Dylan. He's a creature of comfort, of habit. He loves his routines. Morning jogs on Saturdays, soccer on TV Sunday afternoons, turkey sandwiches for lunch with mustard, and just one slice of cheese, never two. But lately, those routines had been changing. He'd started taking more work calls that required him to step outside. Not just outside the room, but outside the house. Sometimes he'd pace in the driveway for 20 minutes, speaking in hushed tones. I once peeked through the blinds and saw him laughing. Not the polite, work-appropriate laugh. No, it was his real laugh, the kind he usually saved for friends or me. Only, I wasn't the one he was talking to. Then there was his gym routine. He'd never been the guy who cared much for protein shakes or cardio machines. His idea of staying fit was walking the dog and lifting Liam up like a dumbbell for fun. But a couple weeks ago, he suddenly signed up for a gym membership. Said he wanted to get ahead of the dad bod. That in itself wasn't suspicious. People change. They decide to take care of themselves. But it was the way he was doing it, sneaking out at odd hours, coming home freshly showered, and wearing cologne to work out. Who does that? I asked him once, jokingly, "Since when do you wear Savage to the gym?" He laughed it off. Oh, I wasn't wearing it for the gym. I just spritzed a little afterward before running into the grocery store. Didn't want to smell like a foot. Seemed like a reasonable answer, if I hadn't seen the same scent in the passenger seat of his car the next day. Yeah. I was snooping now. No point denying it. I had Karen tail him once already, on a random Thursday when he said he was going to a client lunch downtown. She called me later that night with a brief update. Dylan did, in fact, meet a woman for lunch. She couldn't confirm their relationship just yet, but the body language wasn't exactly neutral. Arms touched. They laughed a lot. He paid the bill and walked her to her car. She kissed him on the cheek before driving off. No red lipstick smear, no obvious embrace. But you don't kiss a colleague goodbye like that. Not unless there's something more. That night, I sat across from him at dinner. He was talking about some website migration he was working on for a client, going on and on about how annoying it was to sync the plugins. I stirred my pasta absently, nodding every few sentences, watching his face as he talked. I found myself wondering, is this the same mouth that kissed someone else today? That's when the strangest part hit me, how normal everything still felt. That's the real cruelty of betrayal. It doesn't come with sirens or flashing lights. It comes quietly, dressed up in routine. It sits across from you at dinner. It folds your laundry. It puts the kids to bed. It kisses you goodnight with the same lips that tasted someone else that afternoon. I didn't say anything. Not that night. Not the next one either. Instead, I started noticing more. His laptop was suddenly locked with a new password. His iPad, which used to be open on the counter, now required Face ID. And his phone? Forget about it. Always face down. Always on silent. And one night, I walked into the room and caught the reflection of his screen in the mirror. He was deleting messages. Quickly. Like muscle memory. You know what's even worse than seeing it? Pretending you didn't. But I had to. Karen had asked me to be quiet, to let her team build a clear picture, to give it time. I wanted results, not confrontation. So I played along. I smiled when I had to. I laughed at his jokes. I made dinner. I folded the kids' laundry and took family selfies on the weekends. But inside, I was breaking into 1,000 pieces, each one holding a question he wouldn't answer. The hardest part? Liam and Aubrey were still oblivious. They didn't see it. Why would they? To them, Daddy was still the fun guy who did funny voices and played Lego battles. But I started noticing the tiny cracks even in them. Liam once said, "Why is Daddy always working in the garage now?" And Aubrey, in her sweet, unfiltered way, asked me, "Mommy, do you still love Daddy?" I smiled, hugged her, and said, "Of course I do." Because what else could I say? But the truth was, I didn't know anymore. I didn't know what was real. Was it the years we spent building our life together? The vacations? The nights we held each other through storms, literal and emotional? Was that all still true? Or was it just convenient? I once heard someone say that when someone cheats, it's not just the betrayal of the act, it's the betrayal of the reality you thought you were living. That's what hurt most. Knowing that somewhere out there, my husband might have been living a different truth, a truth that didn't include me. And then, one night, I found something else. He was asleep. Or pretending to be. I got up, walked softly to the laundry basket in our bathroom, and lifted his jeans from the pile. Inside the pocket was a receipt. Hotel bar. 2 drinks. A charcuterie plate. Midnight timestamp. He told me he'd worked late that night and fell asleep at his desk. I stood in that bathroom, holding the receipt like a death certificate. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood still. Because what do you do when your home is full of shadows? You stop trusting the light. I put the receipt in the same folder with the photo of the rapper. Texted Karen the image. Told her I wanted full surveillance on his next business trip. The truth was out there. And I was ready to drag it into the daylight. I've always believed there's a moment in every woman's life when her intuition stops whispering and starts screaming. For me, that moment came on a stormy Thursday afternoon. I remember the weather clearly because it matched my mood. Gray skies, cold wind, thunder rumbling in the distance like it was warning me, "You're about to see something that will change you." Karen, my private investigator, called while I was sipping cold coffee at the kitchen table. I had barely touched it. The kids were at school. Dylan was at a client lunch downtown, or so he claimed. And I was counting the minutes, the seconds, the lies. Karen's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Marissa, we have something. Can you come in this afternoon?" That's all she said. Not, "You might want to prepare yourself." Not, "Are you sitting down?" Just, "We have something." I didn't even change out of my hoodie. I grabbed my purse and keys and drove in silence. No music. No thoughts. Just this steady pulse in my ears and the weight of 1,000 suspicions pressing down on my chest. Mitchell Investigations was tucked inside a quiet little strip of offices, no sign, just a number on the door. Discreet, like always. Karen met me at the door, clipboard in hand. She looked at me with eyes that understood too much. "Let's go into the back," she said softly. We walked down a narrow hallway, into a small room with a round table and a manila folder resting neatly in the center. My stomach turned just looking at it. She didn't sit down right away. Neither did I. "Before we open this," she began, "I want to say that we followed your husband during his last trip to Parkside. He claimed it was for a conference. We have video, photos, timeline. I'll let you look, but if at any point you want me to stop, just say so." I didn't answer. I just sat down, picked up the folder, and opened it. First, the report, neatly typed. Date and timestamps. A familiar name at the top, Dylan Brennan, subject. My eyes skipped down the lines. June 16th, 5:17 p.m. surveillance began at the Parkside Hotel. Subject identified via provided photograph. Entered lobby wearing company badge. Confirmed check-in under company name. Entered room 314 alone. Alone. That word gave me a strange wave of hope. Maybe he was just here for work after all. Maybe this was just one big misunderstanding. But I kept reading. 6:29 p.m. subject left room dressed in formal attire. Description matched black shirt, dark jeans, new leather boots. Exited elevator. Entered hotel restaurant. 6:44 p.m. met with unidentified female subject. Described as brunette, mid-30s, red lipstick, fitted blouse, black skirt. Sat together in booth. Ordered drinks and food. Subject and female companion displayed familiarity, frequent physical contact, laughter. My breath caught. There were photos attached Exhibit A, B, C. And there he was, my husband, sitting across from a woman who wasn't me. Smiling, leaning in, arm brushing hers. Laughing. Not the polite, fake laugh he gives coworkers. This was the real one. The one I hadn't heard in months. And the woman? She wasn't extraordinary. She didn't look like some airbrushed supermodel. She looked ordinary. Comfortable. Confident. Like someone who knew exactly who she was sitting across from and didn't feel bad about it. Exhibit D, 8:51 p.m. Dylan and the woman exited the restaurant. Photo captured them at the elevator. Her hand was on his chest. His hand was on her waist. They were kissing. Not a friendly goodbye. A kiss. Full. Mouth. Pressed. Together. My hand trembled. Karen didn't say anything. She just sat beside me, letting the evidence speak louder than words ever could. Then came Exhibit E. My heart stopped. They were entering room 314 together. She had a key. And Dylan? He was grinning. The report continued. Dylan left the room at 11:17 p.m. same clothes. Appeared slightly disheveled. Entered elevator. Exited hotel. It didn't stop there. The next evening, a different woman. Blonde this time. Pink dress. Met at the same hotel bar. Same pattern. Drinks. Laughs. Elevator. Room. 2 nights. 2 different women. Same ringless hand. Same hotel room. Same betrayal. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at those pages, flipping through the photos like they were part of some horrific dream I couldn't wake up from. Part of me expected to feel rage. But all I felt was hollow. Like someone had scooped out my insides and replaced them with ice. Karen finally broke the silence. "We can continue surveillance if you'd like. But honestly, there's more than enough here." I closed the folder slowly. My fingers were numb. "No," I said. "This is enough." And it was. I didn't need more proof. I didn't want a full scrapbook of his affairs. I had seen enough. More than enough. I now had what I came for, the undeniable truth. And now? Now I wanted justice. The drive home felt different. Not because of the traffic or the route or the weather. It was me. Something inside me had shifted. The way I gripped the steering wheel. The way I blinked at traffic lights. The way I breathed, measured, controlled, deliberate. I was no longer confused. I was no longer questioning. I was done being hurt quietly. I called the lawyer that night, Elliot Graves, referred by a friend who had gone through something similar. Ruthless, brilliant, and unapologetic. The kind of lawyer who didn't just file papers, he declared war. He answered personally. I told him I had evidence. Told him I wanted custody. Told him I was ready. He asked for a consultation. Bring the file, he said. We'll build the strategy from there. And so I did. The next day, I sat across from Elliot, handed him the folder, and watched him skim through the photos with calm efficiency. Open and shut case, he said. You're the primary caregiver. He travels. You have proof of infidelity. We'll file for custody, spousal support, and ask that he vacate the home during proceedings. If he contests, we go to court. But I promise you, Marissa, we will make him wish he'd kept his pants zipped. It wasn't the kind of pep talk I ever imagined needing in life. But I needed it now. Because I wasn't just betrayed. I was about to become dangerous. That night, Dylan came home late. He said he had dinner with a potential client. I smiled, nodded, asked if it went well. He said it was promising. Then he kissed me like nothing was wrong. He didn't know I already had the photos in my drawer. Didn't know I'd spoken to a lawyer. Didn't know I had just filed for divorce. And didn't know he was about to be served publicly. At his job. In front of everyone. Because betrayal deserves a spotlight. And I was done letting him operate in the dark. People talk about heartbreak like it's soft. Like it's some delicate, tear-soaked thing that leaves you curled up in bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering, "Why me?" into the dark. But let me tell you the truth, real heartbreak burns. It's hot and violent and loud. And once you've been burned long enough, you stop crying and start sharpening your edges. That's what happened to me. After Karen gave me the photos, after Elliot laid out the strategy, I sat in my car outside the law office and realized I wasn't broken. I was boiling. There's a difference. The woman who walked into Mitchell Investigations trembling and hoping she was wrong, she was gone. I wasn't praying for explanations anymore. I wasn't waiting for Dylan to come clean or fall on his knees with apologies. No, I wanted consequences. I wanted his lies held up like glass to the sun for everyone to see. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to be gutted, publicly, irrevocably, completely. So I asked Elliot to do something bold. Serve him the divorce papers at his office, I said. He raised an eyebrow. At work. Yes, in the middle of the day. In front of his colleagues. I want him humiliated. He studied me for a second, then nodded. Done. That's what I loved about Elliot. No hesitation. No judgment. Just action. He filed the paperwork under irreconcilable differences, which, let's be honest, was the polite way of saying your husband stuck his loyalty in a stranger. I made it clear in my request. Full custody of the children, primary residence in our home, shared finances to be split, and Dylan to vacate the property immediately. Oh, and no alimony. I didn't want his money. But child support? That was non-negotiable. I earned my own income. I paid my share of the bills. But I wasn't going to let the man who betrayed our family buy himself freedom without paying for his responsibilities. Do you want to fight for any of the inheritance? Elliot asked. I shook my head. No, that money came from his grandfather. Let him keep it. I don't want anything tainted. That was the truth. The thought of fighting over money felt beneath me. I wasn't here to win pennies. I was here to win myself back. Over the next few days, I kept everything normal on the outside. I still made the kids' lunches. Still picked them up from school. Still smiled at Dylan's mother when she dropped off Liam's science project kit and called me sweetheart. But inside, I was a woman planning a demolition. And demolition, my friends, is a precise art. You can't just bulldoze a life. You have to plant the explosives in the right places and wait. Dylan had no idea what was coming. That Sunday, we had dinner together as a family. Chicken parmesan, his favorite. He talked about some new marketing campaign he was designing, blissfully unaware that on Tuesday at 11:03 a.m., a woman in a blazer was going to walk into his office with a manila envelope and ask if he was Dylan Brennan. He'd nod, confused but polite. And she'd hand it over and say, "You've been served." I imagined the color draining from his face. I imagined the stammered excuses that would follow. The calls, the texts, the panic. And me? I plan to ignore every one of them. On Monday night, he kissed me on the cheek before bed and said, "You've been amazing lately. Thank you for being so patient with me. I know I've been a little distant." I smiled. I understand. We all get busy sometimes. And I meant it. We do. But he had been busy ruining everything. The morning of the serving, I dropped the kids off and came home to a quiet house. My phone was silent. My heart wasn't. I paced the kitchen, pretending I wasn't waiting for 11:03 to hit like an earthquake. At 11:07, my phone buzzed. "Elliot Graves, it's done." No fireworks. No confetti. Just a text. And yet, I sat down on the edge of the sofa and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just felt weightless. That night, Dylan didn't come home. He didn't call. Didn't text. Good. Let him sit in it. Let him stew in the wreckage. Let him see what happens when a woman chooses herself over his comfort. The next morning, around 10:45 a.m., my phone rang. His number. I almost didn't answer. But I did. I didn't speak. Just listened. A beat of silence. Then his voice, small, almost trembling. "Marissa. I'm sorry." And then he hung up. That was it. No explanation. No pleading. No fighting. Just a single "I'm sorry" and a dial tone. It almost felt like a victory. But not quite. Because even as I stood there, staring at my phone, the truth sank in. There was no winning here. Not really. There was only surviving. And then rebuilding. That evening, I took the kids to McDonald's. We sat in a booth, ordered fries and nuggets and ice cream. Aubrey spilled her chocolate milk. Liam told me a joke he made up at recess that didn't make sense, but made us both laugh. They were happy. They were mine. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't pretending to be okay. I was. Later that week, I met with Elliot again. He was already working on the next steps, filing motions, arranging mediation, preparing for custody hearings. His assistant had already prepared the asset division chart. "You sure you want to stay in the house?" he asked. "Yes, even with the memories?" I smiled. "Especially with the memories. They're mine, too. And I plan on making new ones." He nodded, clearly impressed. "I've handled a lot of these cases. I don't say this often, but you're tougher than most." "I'm not tough," I replied. "I'm just done being hurt. People think revenge is fire and fury. But it's not. Revenge is cold. Calculated. It's paperwork and strategy and timing. It's knowing when to stay quiet. When to smile through the storm. When to strike. And me? I struck when he least expected it. He wanted to live a double life. He wanted me to play the fool. But I rewrote the rules. And now? Now he'll have to explain to his boss, his mother, his friends, and someday, our kids, why he threw it all away for a few cheap nights. I didn't ask for this war. But if he wanted it, he should have known. I don't lose. There's a strange peace that comes with clarity. Not comfort. Not joy. But peace, the kind that settles in your bones when you stop hoping for apologies and start preparing for consequences. After Dylan was served at his office, the silence between us stretched like a taut wire. He didn't come home that night. Didn't text. Didn't even try to lie. I expected at least one call, some kind of explanation, even a weak excuse. But there was nothing. And that nothing? That told me more than words ever could. It told me he knew he was caught. And it told me he was scared. Good. Because that's exactly what I needed for the next part of the plan to work. See, serving him in public wasn't just for satisfaction, though yes, I'd be lying if I said I didn't take pleasure in imagining the look on his smug face when a stranger handed him a manila envelope in front of his coworkers. But beyond that, it was strategic. It disarmed him. He thought he was playing a game with someone asleep at the wheel. Thought I was too busy with the kids, too trusting, too soft to notice the lipstick on his collar or the empty condom box shoved under the passenger seat. He underestimated me. And now? Now he'd learn exactly how dangerous it is to disrespect the wrong woman. After the initial silence, Dylan finally came home late Friday night. The house was quiet. The kids were asleep. I was sitting at the kitchen island, sipping a glass of red wine like I didn't have the biggest emotional weapon already cocked and loaded in my desk drawer. He walked in, looking like hell, tie loosened, hair a mess, the faint smell of whiskey and desperation clinging to him. He didn't speak. Just stood there, eyes sunken, waiting for me to say something. I didn't. So he did. Can we talk? I sipped my wine, set the glass down, and said, sure. But from now on, I prefer all communication to go through our lawyers. He flinched. Not because I'd said it, but because I meant it. This is really happening? He asked. I stood up slowly. You lost the right to ask me that the second you brought strangers into our bed. I gave you years of my life, Dylan. I gave you children. Loyalty. My body. My trust. And you gave it away for bar tabs and motel sheets. He looked away. Coward. Do the kids know? He asked, voice shaking. No. And they won't. Not from me. I paused. But one day, they'll figure out who you are. And that's not on me. He tried to speak again, but I walked away. Because it wasn't a conversation. It was a confirmation. He was exactly the man Karen's folder proved he was. The next morning, I went back to Elliot's office with everything I had, bank statements, joint account records, car maintenance receipts, even our last 3 years of tax returns. We combed through them like detectives building a case against a criminal. And in a way, we were. Because infidelity isn't just betrayal of the heart, it's a betrayal of a shared life. Of promises. Of resources. Of time. Elliot found something interesting in the joint account logs. See this? He said, pointing to a transaction from 6 weeks ago. He withdrew $4,200 in cash over 2 days. Said it was for a team retreat. I nodded slowly. There was no retreat. Exactly. And see this one? Jewelry store purchase. But you didn't get anything, did you? There's something surreal about preparing for battle in a room where everyone's wearing suits. It's not like TV, where someone stands and screams, and the judge bangs a gavel for dramatic effect. No, real court is cold, clean, and efficient. The walls are beige, the chairs are stiff, and everything smells faintly of paper and old arguments. But don't let the calm fool you. Because when your marriage is on trial, when the life you built is being carved into legal segments and measured with folders and affidavits, there's nothing calm about it. I stood outside the courtroom with Elliot at my side. He held a binder full of documents, evidence, photos, transcripts, financial records. My stomach turned just looking at it. Inside that binder was my pain organized, labeled, and ready for presentation. Are you ready? Elliot asked, adjusting his tie. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid of losing. No, I was afraid of seeing Dylan again. Of seeing his eyes and remembering that I used to love him with every cell in my body. That's the part people don't prepare you for, not the fight, but the flashbacks. The first time he kissed my forehead in our kitchen. The way he danced with Aubrey in the living room on her 3rd birthday. The night he stayed up with Liam during a flu spell and rocked him until morning. Those memories hit hardest when you're about to rip your life apart under oath. Still, I took a breath and walked in. Dylan was already there. He sat beside his lawyer, looking smaller. I don't know if it was the suit that didn't fit quite right or the way he avoided eye contact, but he looked like someone who had shrunk under the weight of his own consequences. Good. The judge, a woman named Justice Langford, looked over her glasses and began the proceeding. Mrs. Brennan, your petition outlines a request for sole custody and primary residence, with joint visitation and shared educational decision-making. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And your reasoning? I swallowed and stood. My husband has been repeatedly unfaithful, as proven by documented surveillance. He used shared finances to fund his extramarital activities and has shown no remorse. While I believe he should still have access to our children as their father, I cannot in good conscience share a home or co-parent equally with someone who put his desires above the stability of our family. The room went quiet. I could feel Dylan shift in his seat, but I kept my eyes on the judge. Elliot stood and handed over the folder. Your Honor, Exhibit A contains dated surveillance photos, timestamped transactions from joint bank accounts, and receipts that correlate with the subject's time away from home, specifically during work-related travel. The judge flipped through the folder, her expression unreadable. Mr. Brennan, she said finally. Do you contest any of these claims? Dylan stood slowly. No, Your Honor. I don't contest the evidence. I made mistakes. Mistakes. That word made my blood boil. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. What he did wasn't a mistake. It was a series of choices he made while looking me in the eye every day. The judge nodded slowly. Given the volume of documentation and the admission of guilt, I'm inclined to move swiftly through this. And she did. Within 40 minutes, it was ruled. I would retain full physical custody of our children. Dylan would have supervised visitation for 6 months, followed by a review. The house remained mine, as did all furnishings. He would contribute to child support monthly, based on income. No alimony was awarded. It was clean. And it still hurt like hell. When the gavel dropped, I didn't cry. Not until I got to my car. That's when the silence of finality settled around me like snow. Everything was over. 11 years of marriage, over in less than an hour. Elliot walked me out. That was one of the cleanest rulings I've seen, he said, offering a small smile. You did everything right, Marissa. Then why do I feel so empty? I asked. Because you're human. In the days that followed, I didn't throw a party. I didn't post a single thing online. I didn't buy myself a bottle of champagne or celebrate with girlfriends. Instead, I cleaned the house top to bottom. I rearranged the furniture, donated Dylan's old clothes, took down the framed wedding photo and replaced it with a watercolor painting of the beach we visited the summer before Aubrey was born. That was the trip I'd clung to for years. The memory I'd convinced myself was proof we were still good. But even that memory felt fragile now, like glass held up to light. Beautiful, but easy to break. The kids adjusted quickly. Too quickly, almost. Aubrey asked if Daddy was going on a long work trip. I nodded and told her he'd call soon. Liam, older and sharper, didn't say much. But one day, he walked past Dylan's closet, peeked inside, and said, "It smells better in here now." I didn't respond. But I noticed the way he smiled when we baked cookies together that weekend. The way he lingered in the kitchen. The way Aubrey kept asking for one more story at bedtime and curled up beside me like she finally felt safe again. And that's when it hit me, Dylan didn't just betray me. He betrayed us. And even though the court ruling gave me primary custody, it was my children's trust, their stability, their sense of home that had been shattered and reassembled piece by piece under my care. That was the real win. Weeks later, Dylan emailed me. Not a long one. Just a few lines. Thank you for being gracious. I don't deserve it. I miss the kids. I hope one day they'll forgive me. I didn't reply. Not because I was bitter, but because I no longer needed anything from him. Not answers, not guilt, not closure. My closure was this: a clean house, healthy kids, and a mind that no longer played detective at night. My closure was walking into the kitchen in sweatpants and socks, blasting music while we danced to old Disney songs. My closure was freedom. Freedom from wondering where he was. Freedom from his silence. Freedom from myself, the version of me that waited and hoped. One Saturday, Aubrey climbed into bed with me and whispered, "I like it when it's just us. It's quiet." I smiled, brushed her hair out of her face, and kissed her forehead. "Me too," I said. "You see, people think divorce is the end. But sometimes, it's the beginning of the most honest chapter of your life. The part where you finally stop asking, why wasn't I enough? And start saying I am. And that's power. That's healing. That's what justice looks like, wrapped not in revenge, but in peace. They say healing isn't linear. That's true. Some mornings I woke up feeling free, weightless, like the world had shifted in my favor. And then there were mornings where I stared at the empty side of the bed and remembered, in vivid detail, the way Dylan used to sleep with one leg outside the blanket, snoring like a broken fan. It's funny what your brain holds on to. But grief, even when dressed in betrayal, has a pattern. It gets softer with time. Less like a scream, more like a hum in the background. And with every step I took toward rebuilding my life, that hum grew quieter. I started with the small things. New bed sheets. Not because the old ones reminded me of him, but because I wanted softness that hadn't known his touch. A new rug in the hallway. A new routine. I picked up yoga again, the kind I used to do before the kids, before marriage, before life got loud. I found myself in poses that once felt impossible. And when I held them steady, breathing, alive, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I'd found something in myself that I thought was gone. Strength. Real strength. Not the kind that just survives. The kind that chooses joy. I started cooking for myself again. Not for the kids, not for dinner as a performance for a husband who barely looked up from his phone. But for me. Foods I loved. Meals I used to make when I lived in that tiny studio apartment and believed in things like bubble baths and red lipstick on a Tuesday. I took long walks. I bought a houseplant that I actually kept alive. I read books again. And one night, after the kids went to bed, I poured a glass of wine and opened my old sketch pad. The one I hadn't touched in years. My hands were rusty, my lines messy, but it didn't matter. The art didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be mine. Everything I did now came from that place. Ownership. Reclamation. Not revenge. That phase had passed. Dylan's downfall no longer interested me. He was no longer a central character in my story, just a chapter that hurt, then closed. Still, some chapters don't end without a twist. It came one evening in the form of a phone call from my old college friend, Eliza. She worked at a local bar downtown, the kind with soft lighting and a piano in the corner. The kind Dylan would have hated. "Marissa," she said, her voice careful, "I think I saw your ex-husband last weekend." My body tensed. Okay. He was at the bar. With a woman. Not the same one from the photo you showed me during the divorce. This one was younger. And, well, things got a little messy. I leaned into the call. Messy how? She slapped him. My eyebrows shot up. What? In front of everyone. Called him a liar. Said he gave her herpes. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. I thought you should know, Eliza added gently. Because later that night, he was in the bathroom crying and talking to someone on speaker about how everything keeps falling apart. I sat back, unsure what emotion I was feeling. Pity? No, not really. Relief? Maybe. Justice? Yeah, that was closer. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't tell anyone, not even Elliot. What would be the point? That part of my life was over. And honestly, I wasn't surprised. Dylan had always been reckless. First with money, then with his vows. It made sense that eventually, he'd be reckless with his health too. What caught me off guard wasn't the news of his condition. It was that I didn't feel anything. Not sorrow. Not vindication. Just distance. About a week later, I got a message from his sister. We hadn't spoken much since the divorce, but she reached out in a tone that was almost apologetic. I know things ended badly, she wrote, but Dylan's not doing well. He's sick. He's struggling. He asked if you could call him. I didn't respond. Not because I was being cruel, but because I owed myself more than that. I owed myself peace. And peace meant not reopening doors just because the person who slammed them now wanted back in. Instead, I closed my phone, made popcorn, and sat down with the kids for movie night. We laughed through an animated film we'd seen 20 times already. Aubrey curled against me, Liam threw popcorn at the screen, and I soaked in every second like sunlight on cold skin. This was my home now. Not the house. Not the four walls. But this love, this laughter, this freedom from fear. This version of myself I had fought tooth and nail to find again. And then, as life tends to do, it gave me something I wasn't expecting. I met someone. His name was Noah. We met at a bookstore. I was reaching for a novel on the top shelf, clumsily, I'll admit, and he stepped in to help, made some dry joke about tall people existing to rescue short ones. I laughed. It wasn't love at first sight. I didn't even give him my number that day. But we bumped into each other again 2 weeks later, this time at a cafe, and we sat and talked for nearly an hour. He was divorced too. His ex had cheated, left him for someone younger. I know the feeling, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. I bet you handled it better than I did, he replied with a soft grin. I hired a private investigator and served him papers at work. His eyebrows lifted. Okay, maybe not. We both laughed. The best part? He didn't flinch when I told him the truth. About Dylan. About the betrayal. About how I wasn't looking to be rescued. He smiled and said, "Good. I don't want to rescue you. I just want to know you." That's when I knew he was different. Noah didn't fill a void he didn't try to. I was already whole. He was simply next. And for the first time in years, I let myself fall slowly, honestly, without apology. The kids liked him. He never tried too hard, never overstepped. He showed up. That was all. And it was enough. More than enough. One night, as I lay in bed beside him, our hands laced, no words, just quiet, I whispered, "Do you believe in second chances?" He turned his head, met my eyes. "I believe in earned ones." And I smiled. Because I hadn't just earned this peace. I'd fought for it. You see, my story didn't end with heartbreak. It began with it. And through the fire, the silence, the courtroom, the loneliness, I emerged with something stronger than any promise Dylan ever made. Self-worth. And from that place, I built everything new. Not perfect, but mine. Fully, fiercely, finally mine.